Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of It's in Denver's Nature. We are here in the Denver Community Media space. Just a little bit of introduction, what Denver Community Media is. Denver Community Media is owned and operated by the City and County of Denver. It's the city's public access channel, and it's a resource for anyone living in Colorado who is interested in accessing tools and resources in the media and video production space. It's in Denver's Nature is a program produced in collaboration with Denver Parks and Rec and Denver Community Media. We are here in the studio with two guests. We have Gordon Robertson. Hi, Gordon.
Hi.
And we have Cinceré Eades. Introduce yourself. Tell me a little bit of like what you do, what your role is with the city of Denver.
My name's Gordon Robertson. I'm the Director of Park Planning, Design, and Construction for the City and County of Denver. It is and has been my dream job for the last 16 years. I think local parks and recreation is the most rewarding and most amazing career. And I get to oversee the caretaking of the park system as well as the acquisition and building out of the new parks. So it's a very rewarding job.
Cool. Awesome.
I'm Cinceré Eades. I'm the Assistant Director of Planning, Design, and Construction, but I specifically oversee the Urban Ecology and Trails program. So under my purview is our Urban Ecology team that starts to transition our parks from turf, bluegrass to more of a native, resilient landscape. We have our regional trails program. We have over 100 miles of trails within the city along our waterways. We also have our Green Corps team, which is a new workforce development program that's providing opportunities for youth and people re-entering the workforce to learn natural resource management skills. And then we also oversee work on the South Platte River through the Waterway Resiliency Program.
It does sound great. And I guess I didn't introduce myself. I'm Ivana Corsale. I'm the host of this podcast. So, we introduced the title of the podcast. It's in Denver's Nature. And we'll explain a little bit later, like, what that is. But I kind of want to backtrack and talk more about the game plan for a healthy city, which is really where It's in Denver's Nature kind of like took shape. And, for anyone watching here, you can go into the Denver Parks and Recreation website, denvergov.org/nature, where you can learn more about what the game plan is. But just quoted from the website, the game plan for a healthy city is Denver's Parks and Recreation's vision for creating parks, gathering places, activities, and more that are easily accessed, well-maintained, and equitable in every neighborhood. It's a 20-year plan, so it's nothing, it wasn't born yesterday, so I'm sure there's a lot of work that went into it. And it's a plan that proclaims easy access to parks and open space for everyone, and really it's sort of like a proclamation of a basic right. This should be a basic rights for all residents. We know that Denver has a legacy park system. We're all familiar with our parks. We probably go into a park every single day or frequently.
I hope so.
I hope so too. The question that I have is, like, how is the game plan re-envisioning the park system in making Denver a more resilient city?
About 4 or 5 years ago, we realized that we didn't really have an updated vision for our park system. The previous one was done in 2001. So it was time to update that. And so that's how the game plan came about. We did talk extensively to folks, over 6,000 people. And it was a great process, and it was a timely process because we recognized that the city was changing rapidly, that our climate was starting to change noticeably, and a lot of key things were really changing in ways that we needed a new vision and kind of to redefine our purpose. And one of those key purposes was It's in Denver's Nature. It was that our park system really had to respond to a changing climate, that it had to make sure that it was the landscape of our city that could make it resilient to all the changes that the changing climate would bring.
You said more than 6,000 residents provided that input. Can you maybe put some color into, what were some of the common themes from that feedback?
Folks really wanted to make sure that we maintained our tree canopy and that we grew our tree canopy. They understood that things it was getting hotter. They understood that not all parts of the city benefited from a healthy tree canopy and all the benefits that that brings. So we heard a lot about that.
Okay.
Another one was water conservation. Folks realized that we were a big water user, and that water was a precious resource, and so they wanted to also know that we were doing something about that. Those were two key issues that I heard.
Yeah.
Yeah, and 71% of the survey participants had acknowledged that we should be doing something to transform our landscapes to be more water conscious and also bring nature back into the city.
Yeah. So there is definitely that sense of awareness from the public. Hey, we need more trees. We want trees. And that sense of awareness of like water is a precious resource and it's becoming scarce probably as a result of climate change.
Folks realized that Denver was growing rapidly and it was developing rapidly. And they wanted to make sure that we had the tools and the resources to conserve and protect more land.
Yeah.
It wasn't just that we were just going to have the park system that we had, but that it was a growing park system for new neighborhoods and new areas that we're developing out.
Why is it important to start talking about this now? And can we talk about, some of the examples that DPR is doing with regard to its in Denver's nature?
It's sad to say, but we're seeing climate and heat around the world that is breaking records. And we've been breaking records for the last 20 years, but it's gradually escalating. And so I think that's just a great wake-up call to say we need to change how we do business. And so the why is Denver needs to be resilient and adaptable to a changing climate, and now's the time to really be making those investments.
We're receiving a lot of people into Denver that are coming from other parts of the country that may have more abundance of water that can sustain these lush landscape types like bluegrass. And so I think as we're transitioning our landscapes, we wanted to do a fun and engaging kind of campaign to educate people and have them understand, again, why and then what we're doing. And then also how they can get involved.
Right, exactly. Going back to the areas of the campaign, can we maybe dissect more into what are some of the areas that the campaign is focusing on?
The big one for us is landscape transformations, or AKA turf conversions. So we just passed a new turf grass policy in parks that essentially says that we're no longer going to install bluegrass as our primary form of ground cover. But again, we're going to preserve our recreational spaces and identify areas where we can bring that back to a more high-functioning biodiverse landscape. So again, it's bringing in pollinators, it's reducing water use, and increasing the health of our urban ecosystem. And then all of these dovetail together, right? You can't talk about landscape conversions without talking about water conservation. And so how do these conserve water? And so talking about the Colorado River Basin crisis and how not only our efficient irrigation practices in parks are coupled with the landscape transformations. And then I think there's a lot of questions around the balance between increasing our urban canopy while reducing water use. So we'll spend some time talking about how we intend to strategically grow the urban canopy while we're still implementing all of these other landscape projects. Another focus area is, again, how can the community get involved? And so we'll spend some time talking about environmental stewardship. We have a lot of partners and volunteer projects around DPR and the park system. So how neighbors can get involved and contribute to the health of a vibrant park system. And then also talk about our new Green Corps team, which is some of the workforce development that we're doing within the department. The last one is just as important, which is our habitat protection. So again, these all tie together. How, when we're transitioning a landscape from bluegrass that, generally doesn't support that many key species, how are we increasing our pollinator habitat and making sure that, again, we're providing spaces and protection for wildlife?
I like how you mentioned that there's a lot of interconnection between we want to bring more trees, but then we need to talk about water preservation and how those two can coexist together in a harmonious way. What are some of the challenges that you see in executing this plan? And I want to talk about challenges, but also opportunities.
Our citizens, our park users, the neighbors to our parks, we want them to understand that we're doing this for, I think, all the right reasons. But there will be changes and people will see things that look very different. And we don't want that to be a surprise. So
Right.
I think that's a big
Yep.
challenge.
Yeah, I was going to agree. Like I said earlier, it's different, and so it takes time to get used to change. And so it's about education on the benefits and again the why. And then I've noticed once you have those conversations, people come around and really start to embrace it and get excited about it.
You've partnered with organizations like the Park People, Denver Water, Denver Park Trust. How did this partnership come about, and what is their role in this initiative?
We are a department that depends on lots of other folks because we do so much across so many aspects of the city that we can't be the experts in everything. We can't have enough people to do everything. So we really rely on our partnerships. And Denver Water has always been a partner with us, more so today than ever, as we struggle to understand the future of our water resources. We are Denver Water's #1 customer, and so we have a real responsibility to reduce the amount of water that we use, but also just to use it more efficiently. Because the public good, we are the place to use water because everyone gets to benefit from it. If everyone's watering their backyards and they just get the benefit from that, I think that's less good than the public parks being that space where you can come together and enjoy a beautiful bluegrass lawn and kick a soccer ball. So we'll always need water. We'll always want to have those resources, but the more we can cut down our use and the more we can be more efficient is critical. And then folks like the Denver Park Trust are a new organization. They realize that we need assistance in really fundraising private money. And so they're out there doing that on our behalf. And we work real closely with folks like them and the Park People to do our mission, and not rely solely on taxpayer funds and our staff.
What can residents do on their own to help and continue to make Denver a resilient city? What can I do as a Denver resident to help combat climate change?
Yeah, I think similar to how we're evaluating park spaces for non-functional turf, you can evaluate your front and your backyard and look at how you can reduce that footprint to conserve water. There's a lot of resources we plan to share that can provide a blueprint for how you could convert your front yard from bluegrass, especially if you're not utilizing it, to something that's more drought resilient. You can also disconnect your downspout and create a rain garden within your front yard, and then that provides irrigation to your plantings while also purifying the water before it goes into our stormwater system and then ultimately into our lakes and streams.
So this is our first episode introducing this initiative, this campaign. It's in Denver's nature. And a question, I guess, for both of you is, what do you want listeners and viewers to get out of this podcast?
That's a great question. We are a big department. We do a lot of stuff, and I think we want to lift the veil up, the curtain, remove the curtain, and let people understand what it is we're doing. As employees, as passionate advocates for Denver. We were doing a lot of stuff, and I don't think the general public knows why we're doing it, what we're doing day to day. And so we hope these podcasts can kind of, let people know the nuts and bolts of what we're doing and why we're doing it. A lot of people watch that show, Parks and Recreation.
Yes.
And they have a very clear idea of our department, and they're not wrong. Unfortunately, it's too much like that show sometimes. But we're trying to keep our eye on the ball and really focus on making Denver a resilient and adaptable city. We hope every podcast will give them something unique they never had any idea about. They had no idea that the history of the parks was this, or that resiliency in an adaptive city means that. And so we want them to come away educated and also know what they can do individually to help.
I like it how you described it, sort of like lifting that veil. And as you said, a lot of people don't know what agencies like Denver Parks and Rec do. And it's sort of like putting kind of like that on the spotlight, bringing that level of awareness and at the same time empowering the communities to say, this is what you can do on your own.
And we hope that it creates these demonstration spaces where people can go and see it in action, and then look at how that can translate into their own property.
If people have questions, they watch the podcast and say, I have a specific question about turf conversion. Can they email? Do they have a direct connection with Denver Parks or Rec to ask those questions?
So you can go to the website, denvergov.org/nature, and that is going to break down all of the different focus areas. And then those will link you also to specific websites where you can get in touch with the staff that specialize within those areas.
And if you just have a general question or concern, the 311 system, you can shoot us a 311 request, question, concern, and we really do get back to you. It actually does work.
Yeah, for sure. Gordon, I hear that you have a fun fact about parks.
Yes, it's our goal to close every podcast with a fun fact.
Okay.
And my fun fact, leading into the next podcast about the history of parks, is the first, what is widely known as the very first public park. Was created in England in 1847. It's called Birkenhead Park. And it is the first park because it was the first publicly funded public space for the purpose of recreation. And the wealthy of England realized that the industrializing of their cities, the urbanization of their cities was creating an unlivable space for the workers. And the workers were noticing it, and they were living in squalid conditions. And so they said, we have to create a beautiful space where they can go to and release their tensions. And actually, one quote I read was they wanted them to go because they knew they would have to dress up with their family, and it would keep them as industrious people. I mean, it's an amazing history. Of course, the park designs that they created to create the parks were modeled after the aristocrats' gardens, the king's gardens, the wealthy's estates. And so they are manicured lawns, they're ornamental gardens with flowers and other vegetation brought in from other parts of the world. They weren't typically they were not native, and they were immaculately kept. So unfortunately or fortunately, that's how essentially all park design occurred, especially in the United States and elsewhere, for the last 100 years. The history of park design was to model the King's Garden. We're excited to understand that now we have a new purpose. It isn't for folks to stroll around, although that is an important part of parks. We have other purposes too now, which is to respond to a changing climate.
Thanks for watching, and we'll tune in for the next episode about the history of parks.